So I'm going to commit heresy today. Basically, I was going to do a look at really cool zoom lenses that were affordable. And one of the ones I've had this for years. I forgot, I've got two. The one that we're shooting on now is this other one. It's the Tokina 28-70 F2.6 to 2.8. Now, if you look for this zoom on Google it, you'll come up with the word ingenue. And what happens is it's like a rabbit hole. You start to look around. The only reason this came up is because I was doing some research. I just wanted to research the lens properly. And you find multiple things online about its ingenue design. It was a handover. They gave them the blueprints and all this kind of information. And you think, okay, wow. And when I bought it, I sort of heard about this. I wasn't really bothered. It was just a really good. It was like 150 quid. It was really affordable, and it was a good zoom. So I mean, it's got great specs. So it's the Pentax one that I'm shooting this on, and obviously, Pentax 28-70. You don't get much choices if you shoot on a K1 camera, apart from the very expensive one. So yeah, so I started to look into this, and it just gets a bit curious. The whole thing. Let me explain. So I sort of there's a really good thing that Google does. Google's been archiving for years, like Practical Photographer and all their lab tests and stuff. So for the 90s, 91, 94, all that, you can go back, find the lab reports on these lenses when they first came out. So when you look at the modern reviews of this lens, it states certain pieces of information, and the internet's a wonderful thing, but it's like if it's ever accidentally put in somewhere the wrong way, everybody who looks at it then takes that information and it sort of carries on. It just has a life of its own. Then it becomes, sort of like strange fact. There's a really good case with the Olympus M1 camera. There was a throwaway comment from some Olympus rep or something that said they only made 5,000. And obviously Wikipedia updated and everybody said they only made 5,000 of these cameras. But there's a guy who's done massive research into it, and they made over 50,000 of those cameras. So that tiny thing that grew out. So let's stick with the ingenue thing. So I pulled up the lab reports for the ingenue 28-70 f2.6 and the Tokina 28-70 f2.6 to 2.8 AF lens. Now, the first thing that you see when you research this lens is you see that they're very, very similar, in their optical construction. So you see the construction of the Tokina is 16 elements in 12 groups. Now, if you look everywhere online, they will mimic that figure. It'll say 12 elements, 16 elements in 12 groups. However, if you look at the lab report and you actually look at the manufacturer's documentation that came with the lens, it's 16 elements in 4 groups. So they're not the same. They're not the same internally. Okay, and then you start to look at all the other things. The true focal length of the Tokina 28-70 is 29.93 to 70. The true focal length of the ingenue is 28.37 to 66. So there's a big difference there. Also, the throw of the lens is incorrect. And then I've got the chart testing information here. And when you look at the test responses from the ingenue and you look at the test responses from the Tokina, they're totally different. There's literally nothing the same on them. And when you look at the sort of like the summary, I'll post these up somewhere. I'll put these in the video. I'm going to put these they're in the video. You should be looking at them by now, actually. If you look at the information, they sort of talk about this. They're not similar at all. They say that the ingenue is like sort of better at 50mm and all this. Anyway, so there's that. So I still can't find anywhere of any kind of official information online that states that when ingenue stopped production of their consumer lenses, when they just up before they were sold to Thales, that they handed any kind of thing over to Tokina. Now, historically, things have changed hands. So, not all camera manufacturers lens manufacturers make their own lenses, or like Pentax didn't make their own lenses. They did a deal with Tokina to produce certain lenses for them. Ingenue is very different. In 1975, there's a brilliant article in American Cinematographer where they interview ingenue. and they talk. It's the same episode that's got Jaws in it. If you want to have a read of that one, and they interview them. They have a tour around the factory, and you see the detail that Ingenue goes into making those lenses. They take the blanks, they polish them, they then use computers, and it's fascinating how they produce their optics. But it still leads the thing is, how did we get between a Tokina and an Ingenue? Now, to me, it's quite apparent that this glass isn't Ingenue glass. This is something else. And I would imagine that if they did do any kind of shared technology, it would have been the chassis. I'm trying to find another Ingenue. I know people have shot these things, they look similar, but it's just not right. Because if you look, the chassis design of these, I can sort of understand, because Ingenue is fiercely independent. And one of the things I read is like, that lens, it was the first and last French designed autofocus lens, so they're quite proud of it. So at that time, Tokina were doing autofocus. So I think it's something to do with the chassis. I think maybe Tokina were making the chassis element for them. Absolutely not the lenses. That's Ingenue. And as you can see by the optical performance here, they're very different. They're very, very different. So maybe that's where that comes from. Maybe that there is some weird thing on a forum where some guy speaks to some other chap and he was going, yeah, Tokina needed. I don't know about that. It's a really weird little commentary thing. But they don't actually say what technology they shared. And we know that people share these lenses, share technology, but they don't necessarily share the lenses. Ingenue used to work with Leica on their lenses, and we actually know that Tokina produced a zoom lens for Leica. So when they say they produced a zoom lens, they don't tell you if they produced the glass, which I doubt. So it's one of these things where, something like we knew Minolta made glass for Leica as well. But Ingenue, not so much. They were fiercely proud of their optics, and they still are today, and they're incredible zoom lenses. So I don't know. I think the whole tale comes from something to do with maybe they were making the casing. Maybe they were that polycarbonate casing on the actual Ingenue. Maybe it's something to do with the clutch mechanism. Maybe that was being produced for Ingenue. And then when it folded back, obviously, that thing that they designed for Ingenue, they could keep, and then they could put, because this is a 12-element lens, 12-group lens, 16-element lens. It's very, very different compared to the construction of the Ingenue internally. And what matters most about lenses, it's the glass. So when I saw that, you can buy these for like 500 quid online, I bought this for like, 150, next to nothing. It was just a concern because it's sort of one of those things that there's no real proof out there of either thing that it's Ingenue or not. From my just simple research I was on board with the Ingenue thing for like literally 10 years. I literally believed that. And then I just dug up the two reports and I looked through it, and then I did some more reading of American Cinematographer, the March 1975 edition. And you look at Ingenue's history with lenses and how they make their lenses. I find it a real stretch that there's Ingenue glass in here. I think Tokina needed a foot up. I think that they used this platform to develop their own glass, but the two things are quite separate. Anyway, I hope I haven't let you all down there. It's a really annoying thing, isn't it? You look at stuff and you go, okay, that's really cool. And then you Google it and there's a million things about this being Ingenue. But then you look at it and you look at these lens specs, they're totally different things. The MFT on the Ingenue is better, it's a sharper lens than the Tokina, And obviously people would then say, well, it's subjected to the sample quality. But I don't know. Realistically, it's not the same thing. And, the pincushion distortion's different. When I've shot on Ingenues, and I've shot, not the same ones, but I've shot, these are great lenses, but below f4, they're pants, They're not very good at all. They've got chromatic aberration, and I honestly can't understand. I've shot with Ingenues. With Ingenue optical zooms, and those things are like amazing. So I don't know. And the Ingenue lenses here, I know from reading through all the practical photographers through the 90s, literally searching on the word Ingenue where it came up, it was the AF version was a very well respected lens for the Nikons, and used by wildlife photographers because of its clarity and its colour rendition. There's also a Leica R version, not AF, but it was out there and it was used. And then there's the other thing about how expensive these lenses were. This is, you hear that the Ingenue was too expensive for the public to buy. And remember, there is a weird thing. The Ingenue and the Tokina 2870 were in market at the same time. There's a small flip where they're in market. So if you bought the Ingenue new, it was $1,399 at the time. And that's 1991, I believe. Then 1994, 93, when the Tokina came out, that was on sale for $1,250. So there's not a gigantic price hike between the two. And, it's one of the people say, oh, they won't buy it because it's too expensive. That's not quite true either. The Ingenue was made Canon AF, Minolta AF, Nikon AF. And obviously Tokina came in with their 28. I can see a manufacturer coming up with a solution to fill that gap by creating a really high quality optic after Ingenue leaves the marketplace. But I don't know. I really don't. I mean, looking at all this, I honestly think it's one of those internet things that's gone off the charts. And if someone can send me, in the comments, make your comments. I'm putting it torn to shreds now. But if you can tell me, if you can find me something which is an official, like a journalist report, or from some kind of official documentation publication that states about this relationship, then I'm on board. I believe you. I mean, there is tons of stuff about it, but when you look at the facts from the tests, and there's another place called PhotoDO, which has similar information, and the tests are different again on there, so that must be a different set of lenses. Yeah, so I'll leave you with that. But I don't think you should be paying £500 for these lenses. I think that now, if you're looking for a great lens to put on your Blackmagic, Komodo, whatever you're doing, I think there's better lenses out there. And I think these are great. They were great when they were $150. It was a bargain. I think now they've got to like $500-600, and they're stamping the Ingenue name on as if it's something important. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, on that bombshell, thanks for watching.